everyone. Good morning, Amy. Good morning, our audience. Just to start off, COVID is passé, so it's time to stand up and dust off, right? So today we're going to do it with Amy Marks, the Queen of Prefab, Vice President of Autodesk. And I'm honored to be invited to pick Amy's brilliant brain and see how she sees the future of the built environment industry and how that vision might impact all of us. So thank you, Amy, for joining us to share your wisdom and on how buildings are going to be created after the pandemic. To start off, I would like to talk about your life journey and what did it actually take to become the Queen of Prefab and inspiration to many of us in the built environment industry.
I feel like I'm so old. This might take a while. Actually, no, I'm just kidding. I think, it's interesting. I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning when they're little and when they have a job that didn't exist. I think a lot of kids right now are in that same boat. Like they wake up and they think, what's my job going to be one day? And I don't even think that job's been invented yet, by the way. So it's like, that was sort of the same for me. I never really had a path to anything that's occurred. And I think it's all just been like sort of a meandering of learning some skill sets and being in the right place at the right time and being, I would say, forward thinking and doing risky things if it was risky. Funny enough, my friends would never describe me like that. I'm super conservative, like in life of, risk. I always I have a backup to the backup to the backup plan. I'm always the one that you would call if something wrong happened, I would fix it. But I think it's, I grew up in New York in a construction family where I watched my mom and dad start a business in their basement with, $200. And they built over 20 million square feet in New York together. And my little brother now owns that company. So I think, and by the way, you might hear construction in the back because I'm actually renovating my home at the moment. But yeah, I grew up in the business and I always tell the story how my dad would drag me around to job sites, my mom too. And they'd see a bunch of people looking in the ceiling. And my dad or mom would say, like, that's costing us money right now. Either that or we're making money. I'm not sure which, but something's happening over there where, there's a tension over there. We're not making something happen. And I recognized really early on that there was this like disconnect between, I think, just design and construction that always was perplexing to me. And, my family, my dad just fixed it with sheer brute force. Like people knew him as a caricature of, a guy that would, go come after you, which I always say, if you think I'm aggressive, I look very shy compared to the rest of my family, maybe. But yeah, and I was lucky enough to have an opportunity. I went to the University of Florida undergrad. Pretty much everyone kept saying, stay out of this industry, stay out of the industry. And somehow, I went to undergrad there and went back to help my family business at one point. I had done some other things actually, more around like barter partnerships and things like that to try to understand businesses and what they could trade with each other, which I thought was always good. To me, I love like the conversation of win-win. So I feel like that skill set has sort of helped me. And then after I went back to help my family business, I had the opportunity to buy a 75-year-old, not through my family, but through the opportunity that I found to buy a manufacturing company that was making steel and concrete modules, and stayed there and became the president eventually, and then left, started this crazy consulting company that was the first of its kind, where people sort of laughed at us and laughed at me and thought, what are you ever going to do with prefabrication and consulting? Like, who's ever going to hire you? And why would you do that? And architects would look at me around the table and say, like, I don't get it. Like, are you the architect of record? Like, tell me what's going on. So I've been really lucky to have put down the tools. And I think, understood a lot of things around process and what, I always say it's not hard to prefabricate pipe. It's hard to get culture and leadership and process that enables you to prefabricate pipe. Why? I prefabricated pipe. And then I watched how no one could get prefabricated pipe on jobs, and it made no sense. So yeah, and the whole Queen of Prefab thing is sort of funny, Sal. I don't even know if you know the story because, we've talked a lot about a lot of things. I think it happened actually when I was chairing a conference in Asia, to be honest. And I remember, I think they thought a man was coming. They didn't quite understand that I was a woman, maybe. It was early days. And they were like, okay, where's your boss? And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, where's the person talking? And I was like, that's me. And they were like, what? And I walked out on stage and I think they made a joke, almost like this is the Queen of Prefab, like kind of thing. And I thought, oh, I kind of like that. And then we just sort of hashtagged it a bunch of times, and it just stuck. And I like it. I think, honestly, like there's there's a lot of tongue in cheek to it. There's a lot of fun, but because I love reaching and evangelizing people on social, it does its purpose. You know what I mean? Like it has a name and people remember it. So, but I do like it, to be honest. I like being a girl. You know that about me. I love being girly. So I think that's sort of the evolution. Luckily enough, I ended up at Autodesk, I think recently. And I don't know, that's part of the end of the journey as we're getting, hopefully not the end, but this part of the present journey, I think of that's a different story, how I got here, I think, but that was sort of the evolution prior to being at Autodesk.
Nice. That's a cool story, and I like it that how your career journey has been that mix of theory and hands-on. So it's an earned title, Queen of Prefab. It hasn't come easy.
No,
so it's like a badge of honor, which it is. So it's even though it gives that nice soft flavor into even though we are in serious business, it doesn't have to be dull. It can be something that inspires people and should be inspiring. That's truly what you do to us. So then having such perspective and incredible long-term experience in prefabrication, and now being the vice president at Autodesk, what do you think about the current state of prefab in the United States? Are we actually seeing the forest from the trees, so to speak?
Yeah, like my perspective is always global, right? So like, interestingly enough, when I came to Autodesk, the way I got here is they were talking to me about the current strategy. And I didn't love at the time, this was a few years ago, there were parts of it that were good and parts of it that I just didn't understand. And so we started talking at that point. I was like, I think this part works, but this part doesn't work. And this is, in reality, that sounds good, but that's not really what happens. That's always me. I'm always like, wait, back up. If I'm buying something or doing something or so, I'm always like putting myself in that person's shoes. Funny enough, everyone calls me aggressive. I'm probably more empathetic. It's probably more empathy they don't recognize, that I'm just like, if I were that person, would I do that thing? And I can't imagine doing something. So I think it's, what's going on now and what's really exciting is that we're getting a lot of attention around jobs that are happening now that are big, or things that are happening that, go well. And there's also obviously things in the news recently, even the big companies that are not doing well, that we're sort of out there. And I think what we're learning in the United States and around the world is that it's not about, for me, it's more about what we said, and more about the process of things, more about the data that doesn't exist, that's necessary. So if you look at my social post today, I'm not going to be saying design for manufacturing and assembly anymore. And I want to say data for manufacturing and assembly. And I think the reason, in the US, at times we've been ahead in places and at times we're behind, is that, we're sort of a siloed ecosystem of a lot of industries. Every time somebody says the word industry, I'm confused. I'm like, which industry? The architecture industry, the mechanical contracting industry, the owner, your data center, like everyone's so different. And I think like we've had this very siloed cash for chaos place where one of my guys on my team, As Jazat, coined that phrase. It's like, we made money on the misinformation and gaps from the silos. We get paid a lot within our silos for things that are very wasteful. But I do think right now, because there's a lot of top-down influence for certainty from companies like yours or other serial owners, as I call them, that data, and also the data sovereignty and data security and things, because there's so much around that, and understanding the connectivity of the data from start to finish, that's actually what's driving things right now. I think everybody recognizes building in a factory just makes more sense. That's like, we get that. But okay, that's fine. Once you get that, now how do you get there? How do you understand the data for that thing that needs to be manufactured? How do you productize that? Not fabricate it downstream. How does it become a product so I can select it as an architect, consume that data, and use, the parametric design of that data and connect it to other data to create a good end result and outcomes that I set the parameters for as the person in that case doing design. I think in reality, the world is sort of behind a little bit. I don't even want to say one group versus another, because even the countries that are doing the most amount of prefabrication are mostly still doing prefabrication, right? What we need to do is we need to have productization up front, and we need to connect that data across all the stakeholders for the most efficiency. I know that because we still have a lot of waste going into our landfills, right? And all this digital waste that we have, because we think of it as like our only solution is to get people up to the front, maybe draw some things and somehow make it later. All this digital waste is leading to all this physical waste. And I think about like all the manufactured elements that I have that have very little waste when you make them. But, we don't have that. And exponentially, we have more waste than anybody else. So I think, I don't know, it's maybe a little bit of a headsy conversation as you and I always have. It's like, is the US ahead or behind? I think the world is behind. And also I think the world is catching up, which is a weird way to say it. It's like they're doing things, the biggest customers in the world, the governments are getting involved, but they have to recognize it's not about that piece part at the end. It's about moving that data up front so that you can make the right choices for the right performance, for the right customers, for the right outcomes. And I think we have to change their mindset, flip it around, right? That's probably a good way to answer that.
Nice. I made a note to my notebook that there's a data for manufacturing and assembly. I'm going to start using that as well, because there's a lot of discussion in the global industry, even though I always try to explain that the industry is always local and business is global.
Yes.
The data is the common language. So
right.
When dealing with language barriers, and me coming from Finland, so being a native Finnish speaker, everything that I'm learning from the industry now is basically in English, sometimes in foreign languages like Japanese. And it's incredible to look at the translations of what is a specific product called in different languages. And when you talk about the productization, that truly brings us into that global business that overall the built environment industry is very standardized. And
yes.
now is the opportunity to standardize the digital version of it. So it's incredible to listen to your story about how you're thinking about the future.
I think that's so important, Sala. I think what you just said is super important. I think when you start saying the words standardize around our ecosystem, people freak out. It's like even the most people that are all for this, they freak. I was talking to one of my favorite mechanical contractors in Australia this morning, showing me cool pictures of prefab. And he was like, well, but standardization. I'm like, you want that to happen. You want certain things to be commoditized and aggregated into better products. And you want to be able to have a baseline of that to keep your lights on all the time as a manufacturer. And then if you choose, you want to, obviously for that, you want to beat people on the street, get more people to you, talk about your benefits, talk about why your product's better than somebody else's, even if they're somewhat standardized. And then if you choose, you can customize lots of things and you can make different money on those parts of your business. And I think it's like, we pretend like in this space, like that doesn't happen. And like, I think that we think we're the only business on the planet ever to have done something. It's so funny to me. I'm like, again, I went to HBS. So it's like Harvard case studies are like abound, right? So it's like, we just think there's no other case study like it on this. And it kind of blows my mind. Like that's why, me, I'm always talking about fashion or food or like, aerospace, whatever. It's like, we just have to like open up our eyes and recognize like, wait, we're on a planet with other industries and stuff that have done stuff just like this better than what? Of course. Yes. Wait, we don't have to make up what it means to be a manufacturer. There's like software you can buy out of the box to be a manufacturer. Yes. Like I'm always amazed that we think we have to start from scratch in our space. Right.
Your passion for this, and that kind of like you're already leading us to the third question that I have for you, and with all the change management the global industry is going through as people are learning new technology, learning new tools, re-engineering processes, and having to unlearn something that they've been operationalizing and managing for decades already, and
right.
Back in the 1900s, that the digital transformation is evolving the built environment. But what do you see as the influencer trends in prefab that are shaking the entire industry?
I mean, at first, interestingly enough, I think you can't look at digitization by itself, right? Like too many people think of digitization as getting off paper. Right, wrong, or indifferent, whether that's the true meaning of it or not. And there's digitization and digitalization. I always get into that conversation. But, it's like at the end of the day, yes, we need to use technology. Yes, we need to get off paper. Yes, the data has to be accessible to all. And we have to be able to move it across a platform so that people can access it without having to sit in front of their desk. You know what I mean? Everyone sort of gets that. I think what is not so clear and needs to be more clear to people is that convergence is also happening at the same time, right? And convergence, it's funny, it's not a fancy word. I'm not so fancy. I always say but it truly is the right word, because you're seeing convergence, the merging, right, of different technologies right now. You're seeing that's why digitization is so important, because of convergence. So it sort of goes in that order for me. It's like things are changing. This is no longer my phone. This is my computer and my phone and my garage door opener and my mapping skills and my whatever, my dating app, if it's you, whatever, you never know. So whatever it does, my social life, that's in that phone. It's not my phone anymore like it was. I think what's going on in our space is that convergence has already happened and is continuing to happen when you have owners that are taking responsibility for their own playbooks of pieces and parts, when they don't want to just push risk onto others, I have lots of big owners that are opening up their own fabrication facilities that are trying to, gain consistency, or they dictate the design and obviously their partners and their ecosystem of what software to use, right? Because they need that consistency because of what's happened for convergence, right? They are no longer just providing one service anymore. They need to provide multiple services, which makes the data more important. And I think the same goes for the downstream players. I don't know many of the general contractors, as an example, that are just general contractors in the pure sense that they used to be, or even architects and designers. Both are buying companies to open up shops and get specialists, and they're getting into consulting on the lean and the prefabrication side, or the data management side, even, and the data, sort of on the opco side of all those. And then you've got even sort of on the side of where prefabrication, most of the knowledge lives, you've got subs becoming more super subs for multi-trade, and sort of jumping ahead of both those groups directly to owners to help them productize things. And they're the true ones that are they're rising up as a manufacturer. And then you have actual manufacturers that make building products coming down with bigger and bigger assemblies. So my feeling is that convergence, that word, that trend, it's not even a trend, it's like the result of the blurring of the lines of business models and process and technology. Our industries are no longer, even though our contracts are siloed and our scopes are siloed, and it's like our behavior is not siloed anymore. And the work we need to and want to provide to be productive isn't siloed anymore. And that's why there's a big disconnect, because it's, you've got guys sort of doing and ladies doing things that they need to do, but there's no contracts for that. And the right people they want to do that, there's no way of enabling that. And their cost structure they historically have doesn't have that. So it's like, I think convergence for me is what's truly driving this transformation. And when that happens, you need digital transformation, because you cannot manage convergence by hand. I love lean, in general, I love lean manufacturing, but if the biggest thing in lean is to get people to the front of the process, it's broken. You know what I mean? That can't be. We don't have enough people anymore to get to the front of the process with the knowledge. I'm not saying you should never collaborate or never go face-to-face. Don't read it like that. People get all freaked out. People have to be a part of the process. I know that, but guess what? I need somebody who can manage that data. I don't need somebody who can tell you that data. I'd rather have someone to the front of the process to manage that data and ensure that that data is clean and treated with the right way, and that people have access. You really and I think you and I have had this conversation, you need sort of you call them digital contractors. I call them systems integrators. You need data integrators, right? You need those guys that can integrate the data. I don't love the word contractor, mostly because they think of contractors and then they think it's their job. It's like, I don't even know if it's your job. I don't even know if you have that skill set to do that. But I do know that you need data integrators, systems integrators that understand the data, whatever that role is, whoever it comes from. This data doesn't have stewardship at the moment. And it's not about design. That's really why that post is coming out today. And I think we get so pigeon-toed into, look, you can have amazing, fabulous design no matter what. No one can stop it. Truly, if it's good design and it's great design, nothing on this planet will ever stop it from happening, right? That's why there's only one of those amazing designers that you can say their names, right? Nothing stopped them. Technology didn't stop them in the past, right? There's amazing design we can see from 100 years ago. They didn't have technology like we do today. It didn't stop them. So how is technology today? And if I productize a few things so that you don't have to draw fire stairs anymore, how's that going to stop you from great design?
Exactly.
Right?
I love how you're describing things. And I picked up a couple of keywords that you mentioned, the siloing and the systems integrator or digital contractor role in owners. So I'm thinking that, is there, in your opinion, is there an open innovation opportunity that in case owners would stop creating their playbooks just for their own internal innovation sake, but expose the playbooks for the greater good of innovation improvement in the building industry, and driver for digital transformation and what happened to the digital stakeholders. Thinking about that system integrator role, that should we be adopting to more of the platform thinking?
So I heard a little bit, you got a little choppy, but I got most of it. So I think, let me repeat it back so I make sure I answer the right question. Do owners need to more open up the kimono basically and share what they're learning on the digital playbook so that it's for the greater good of all? And are we all moving to that platform type of thinking? Right? That's basically the question. I think that's part of it. I'm not saying that you have to open up your kimono in the sense of like everyone needs to know all your secret sauce. I don't think that we need to do that either on the productization side from the bottom up. I do think platform is necessary. An open platform, honestly, that's why I came to Autodesk. I was working with specific clients. And again, like there is no like place I could go that isn't owned by one company or another. However, I came, I believe, to the most neutral company that has in their DNA and culture a drive for the greater good, right? Like I wouldn't have come here but for that. And I interviewed really with all the C-suite, including Andrew and Jim and Amy Bunzel. And now we have two, by the way, we have two new women CFO and CTO on our teams. If that doesn't make you happy, Sala, like it makes me. And they're the best people for the job. And they happen to also be women. So like working with a CEO and a C-suite that truly has a drive to make things better. But here's the thing. In order to get a platform approach, platform is not about one product. This is where people get a little confused. And people misuse the word platform all the time, especially when they're talking about software. So I think there's a difference between a software product and a software platform. A software product can be even a collection of some product that is very closed. And it's very hard to integrate with other things. And it's for the greater good of the software that it's actually closed. And it's very hard for the end users to get additional value outside of that. And we use the words point solutions a lot in our space, right? Like there are a lot of people selling point solutions, I would say, that are not platforms. Even though they say the words platform out of their mouth all the time, they truly are closed point solutions, right? I think the difference in why I came to Autodesk, and again, is that there are products within the portfolio at Autodesk. However, for industrialized construction to be successful, it's not one product. I always say, I point to my ring and I say, there's not one ring to rule them all, right? I hope people remember that. I just like my red shoe. I'm like, remember, Amy Marks points to her ring and said, there's not one ring to rule them all. What you need to do is you need to make sure that you have the right amount of people using those tools, sort of, en masse, if you will, like the majority of the people using those big tools in the big product portfolio chunks, which is happening now, which is why I came here. But you have to connect those things. And a platform truly is better for the ecosystem, not necessarily the individual product. So it's like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. When you think about platform, that is a different culture. That's an open source culture. That's a place where, as long as you're making these connective tissues, you could be a competitor or a partner or, a software that's neither, as long as you make those connective tissues. And I truly came to Autodesk because it is an open platform. And those who have challenged me on it in panels, I've actually pulled up our list of logos with partners that are built on Forge that make this connection. There are just so many of the hundreds and, like I don't even know the final count at the moment. But I think people think of products and they don't think platforms are open. And I came here because of that. You truly need an open platform, but you need it's almost like crossing a river. I came to Autodesk because I think the big stones are here that you already are jumping from to get across. Everyone's stepping on those rocks, right? We do get a little splashy and wet now that we are recognizing we're different people, like different business models. But in order to build a bridge across so you can walk across instead of jumping, those are going to be built with lots of people from the ecosystem, from the environment that are out there that aren't necessarily us. And I think I'm so excited about, the platform mentality and the culture that really exists here, knowing that this has to be open, knowing that you as an owner, by the way, I don't necessarily think you have to open your kimono, but I do think your data has to live and be shared across the platform readily and easily so you can get your outcome. It doesn't mean you don't own it. And, look, you and I sit on things like the Digital Twin Consortium together. We have very interesting conversations there where I believe your data needs to be informed by the products up front. And then that needs to be attached to the specific workflows for each product and the data security for each of those products and the way in which you treat that data and how it connects with the other data. It's a lot of data. It's not like you make one workflow for prefab and it's over. These are thousands of workflows connected to thousands of different DNA pieces and parts. The only way you're going to do that is with machine learning and AI to connect them across a platform to share the right information with the right stakeholders, right? You can never do that with just people. That's why this has been, I would say, like, wholeheartedly, it could be much more successful. It hasn't been unsuccessful. It's just, I think what we've been doing has been successful under the circumstances. You know what I mean? I think that's now you have to, if you recognize the glimmer of, success and productivity and sustainability that this brings us. I don't know anything that could give us better sustainability than this, right? Like on this planet. I don't. If you have one, come toe to toe with me. But if you can put people to work in safe environments and have, social and economic sustainability, industry sustainability, bringing young people here in technology. And then the result is unbelievable environmental sustainability. If you have something better, bring it to my attention, I feel like, right? So I feel like because when I came to Autodesk, like I sit on the VP steering committee for sustainability, which to some people makes no sense. Obviously, they're like, why is she there? Why? Because what I want to do is bring that's reuse is my end result of data, of physicality, of everything. So I think the owners have to play a big role in that. You know why? Because I sit in a lot of meetings where people are like, if my owner asks for it. And I'm like, really? Is that? I feel like that's sort of like an excuse. That's like old thinking. Like, if my owner pays for me to use project management software, I will. Well, why? It's better for you anyway. Shouldn't you just use it? Like, it seems like you should use it anyway. We don't say that anymore, by the way. Remember that? People used to say that, but no one says that anymore. So I just think, again, and we have to get away from the thing like, who's going to pay for that model and who pays for that? It's like, we have to participate as individuals in the ecosystem to invest in the places where we have the most to gain. The issue is many people don't recognize the whole and they only see the parts. And I do think that you do need a platform player that has space in most of the parts, right? That has intent in a lot of the parts and also has great product in lots of the parts. That's why I came here. Because but for that, you're kind of shifting around. I always say, like, for me, I came to Autodesk because I want to play chess, right? Let's say I love chess. I actually do like chess, but I don't love chess. But let's say I love chess. I came here because I could visualize all the chess pieces. I could see them all. They weren't necessarily set up for me to start my chess game immediately, but I could just make some small rearrangements. And the capabilities and technology are there to play chess. I just need everybody to recognize we're all playing chess now. And that, you move this piece first instead of that one. You know what I mean? So that's what's super exciting. I think owners play a huge role in the ecosystem influence, Sally. I beg all my big owners all the time to speak frankly. And look, you could want to do all these things, and you do. And you're one of the best owners out there. But I think, you then have to get your back end guys, the guys that used to write your contracts a particular way and used to do your procurement a particular way, and they have to learn too. And they have to let you do what you know is right. So I think again, I love talking to you because it's a little bit of a headsy conversation and I know you understand it. So it's like, I feel like I'm talking to it's why it's fireside. It's like I'm talking to my friend Salah because we talk about this stuff all the time. Right. And it's like, I think if the more people understand that it's not, you have to have top down, you have to have bottom up change, obviously, like Clayton Christensen talked about, but the deception of that innovator's dilemma, sort of the innovator's deception, as I always call it, is that change isn't happening from the bottom up in this crazy ecosystem. It has to happen top down. It's why I talk to people like you. It's why I, came to Autodesk. We have to have that happen because this is very complex. It's very difficult. And it is, look, saving the world. I'm not saying that I'm saving the world. I'm just saying changing the world so we don't have 40% in our landfill. That's not an easy thing. If anyone thought this was going to be easy, buckle up. I just get ready. But you know me, I'm always up for the challenge. I feel like we need everybody to pitch in a little bit more and we could get there.
I love what you're describing because it's with the chess analogy and talking about the outcomes, the end in mind. We already talked about the future of smart places, smart environments, and smart buildings earlier. this month, and how prefabrication could be supporting owners make the educated decisions of what kind of components they want into their physical environment, so that they understand what assets do they have, what is the digital replica of that asset, how do they manage everything that exists, and how do they keep their physical environment also data secure.
Right.
Can you elaborate a little bit how you see prefabrication supporting that strategy, that if we are building smart environments, and that means that we are digitizing the physical environment more than ever before,
Yes.
traditional construction might not deliver the outcomes or the transparency that we should have as industry stakeholders and as real estate or infrastructure owners, but also those that are working with the owners to make sense of how the physical environment and the social environment is actually performing. So
Yes.
in order to keep all that data secure, safe, I think that there is a piece to consider when designing or creating the data for manufacturing assembly.
Yes.
To make that outcome reality.
You know, it's funny, the part that sort of gets lost in what you just said, right? Which I love everything you said. I think everything you said is true, right? Why do we have digital twin at the product level now for the things owners already have digital twin for? Could you ask yourself as an owner, could you have the current results of digital twin for piece parts that you have if they were not a piece of equipment, if they were broken down into their actual part form? Like you have a piece of equipment that is an assembly, right? You never look at the digital asset of every piece and part that made that, I don't know, operating room ceiling or sorry, not that oxygen, piece of equipment for a hospital, or I don't know, whatever you have digital information now in your data center as an example, or in your office building that's giving you data right now as a digital twin piece of equipment. What the commonality that people forgot, like when they're like, I want that for the whole building. Well, guess what? That piece of equipment, you're not getting it for the housing and the wiring and the, like everything that made that piece of equipment, right? What made that possible? The fact that it was assembled into a piece of equipment and you attach some IoT onto that performance functioning so that you could get data from it, right? What makes people think they're going to be able to get that information from a building, but for productizing it to some piece of equipment? Like, to me, I'm like, it's so clear. And I think that for those that understand digital twin in its final vision, know that it's impossible to do it without having productization at the industrialized construction level. It's like, for me, it's like I always use the expression, I'm like, you need to put down an artificial reef in an ocean in order for an ecosystem to build itself around, for like things to happen around. It's like, you can't do that with like a 2x4, and you can't do it with a piece of pipe, and you can't do it with like just the pump itself. Like every time people talk about digital twin in the future, I'm like, don't say pump, say pump skid. Don't say pipe, say pipe rack. I keep explaining to them, it's the assembly, it's the piece of equipment, it's the end result of that piece that you're productizing. Then you put IoT into that and you understand. The problem is people aren't thinking like it's a product. That designer's like, no, it's still a piece of pipe. And then I designed that pipe to be a pipe rack, which then has these things. No, it needs to be productized as a pipe rack or as a piece of equipment, and that doesn't come from you, the designer. It comes from the supply chain as a digitized supply chain that then can attach the information we need for digital twin so that we can use that. So you can later have this digital representation. But more than that, if you attach it up front, I can do things like generative design and get parameters of what I want for the end results of my building. Forget about digital twin just as my own as built. I care about that. I hate that phrase. I don't like when people say who cares. I care about this digital form that you get and function, but I care more about the fact that you pick the right pieces and parts to create the right outcome with the right supply chain, understanding what's available in the marketplace and who has capacity, and what, if I change the pump on that pump skid to this different pump, could I get it 12 weeks earlier to get a different result? We don't have that information because we think we should be talking about this like a pipe or a 2x4 or a strut that's wrong, right? And I don't like when people talk about, me, I'm like, the words are important to me, but it's the concept of that. You don't just want the intent and then later fill it in with the digital twin information. Like we already have that. Like we already have geometric data that's intent. That's why there's the LODs, right? Like imagine productization. What's the LOD of a of a product. Like what are you doing when it's designed already, and you understand the sustainability aspect of it and the parameters of how it's made and its bill of process, bill of material. You understand the real-time connective availability of it. What do you have to do? What do you know that it can speak to you as soon as it's put into, before it's even put into the design itself? So I think we have to go earlier, and we have to, by the way, the queen of prefab is sort of a funny term. I just want to use productization prefab as the chassis to get all this other data on it. Like, to me, it means nothing. That it's great. And it gives us, we already know what it gives us: safety and secure, all this other stuff, productivity. I already know that. That's like, okay, I get that. Everyone should get past that. What I want to do is use that piece, that product, to connect all this data so that architects can truly be empowered and informed, and owners can get what they want. And we're making stuff that we actually know we can make, and what it costs and when I can get it. That's it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you're only looking at this like it's downstream prefab, what are you really going to get out of it? And I think that's where I'm most misunderstood in life, by the way. In life, they're like, I don't know, just talk to her about a wall panel or something. And I'm like, it's not about making a wall panel for me. It has almost little to nothing to do with making a wall panel for me. I want the data from it. I want the info up front. I want to be informed. I want to give people certainty and security and all the things that I didn't have growing up when I saw these jobs getting done. No one knew what anything would cost. Nobody knew where anything would go. Nobody knew when anything would be finished. I don't like that. And by the way, that's what people don't get about me. I'm very conservative in my life. That's why I'm the girl with the backup plan, because nothing is right. I want things to be right up front. And most people misunderstand me and think I'm super aggressive when I'm asking them all these questions in these meetings. And I'm like, I'm just trying to help because I want them to be right. I want their product to be right. I want it to be, clear so that they can sell more of it, so that they can see this. You know what I mean? Like, I think I'm somewhat, and I think in general, like, women are somewhat misunderstood because we get excited and we raise our voice. And actually, Zoom has been great for me because half the time I'm smiling, and they think when I used to be on conference call, they were like, gee, who's that? This girl's like yelling at me the whole time. And I'm like, I'm not yelling. I'm just super pumped up, excited for you. So I think this whole notion that we can't, it's funny. And you know how I feel about this because we've talked about this. You can't use the same phasing and parameters and think you're going to get some different future. It's like, no, it doesn't start or finish that same way for a completely different future. That would be insanity. Just by the way, I always say, just as if you have a process and you like sort of connect them or stick them in a circle or make them in a different shape, it doesn't make them any less siloed. You know what I mean? It's like you truly have to understand the interfaces to make them less siloed and then rearrange them so that they're connected. Like, just putting one box next to another in like a PowerPoint doesn't make them connected. I always say, it's like, okay, it looks connected, but it really is. That's not connected. I don't know. And I feel like I'm that girl in the world that is like, excuse me. Like, I always have to be like, I don't really know. And you know me, if I don't understand it, I'm a very simple person. I'll be like, I don't even get that. Could you explain that to me? Because if I feel like I don't get it.
Nice. I hope that the audience is picking up from this, that how you're describing, I'm picking up that even though the productization means that you can make choices early on, it doesn't mean that you're stuck with that product forever.
Yeah.
You can already digitally retrofit things before they are commissioned, before they're installed. That's the beauty of prefabrication, that
yes.
You continue improving your build environment for the better outcomes, for the better performance, and thinking about the traditional way of designing and constructing, you're pretty much stuck with what you got for decades to come until you do a very expensive, big renovation or retrofit. With prefabrication, you can continue improving once you learn that what kind of components are currently in the market, what is going to be the next generation, and you can switch things before they are installed, or go and exchange them because it's made so accessible and easy for people.
That's reuse. I mean, Sala, if all of your mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems are interwoven into this 50-year plus lifespan structure, how can you swap it? How do you grow with technology? How do you grow capacity? I always like to say, there's nothing in my life. Can you imagine showing up to buy your phone or to buy your car or what? 95% of the stuff, don't get crazy on 100, but 95% of the things I buy, if somebody said, that's a technology today, you're going to be stuck with that technology for 50 years, but it's good technology. Don't worry. You would never buy any of that. There's not a person on this planet that would buy anything like that, like we do, right? It's crazy. And I think we just need to recognize that sometimes we say things that are just kind of crazy Yeah, it allows you to do things. It's funny, and I'm going to tell you a secret only because it's you. And if let's pretend no one else is listening. I always say you have to look at things in productization like it's a generator, right? Like generators are productized. There's a 200, there's a 250, there's a 300, right? And that's true, but that's sort of my baby step to get there. Now, you and I both know, here's the secret. Don't tell anybody, Sala. If you parametrically design a piece of a system, and that data is accessible and you want to use that parametric design to make a 217.5 because they can manufacture that and they're open to that because they set those, you could get a 217.5 maybe, but don't tell anybody yet. I want them to first know they can get a 200 and a 250, but the technology exists today with parametric design and computational for you today to get a 217.5, but I don't want them to know yet. Don't tell them that yet. It's too complicated. Then they start using words like mass customization and then it scares everybody to death. So I just want to be like, yes, standardize on some products, get to some scalable product. But you and I both know it's just a baby step to get exactly where they want to be with exactly what they want, right? You have to walk before you run, I guess. We have a question.
I like the baby step analogy because babies, they learn to walk and run fast. So that's what I hope that people understand, that even though we're talking about baby steps, it doesn't mean that we are slowing down.
Right.
The prefabrication is a very digital process. And so how do you see that the AEC industry might support the critical digital workflows used in prefabrication? And does an owner have a stake in this game?
Oh my gosh, you are the stake in this game. Your outcomes are the stake in this game. You need, and by the way, not just private owners, but public owners as well that need housing, that need infrastructure. You are the reason this has to happen. And by the way, the reason this has to happen is because people need data and people need digital infrastructure on this planet and people need a place to live and they need an office to go to and they need a hospital bed. That's what's at stake now. And by the way, we need to do that without wrecking our entire planet. So also at stake, right? The thing that they can do to really participate in it is I need owners to release some of these things that stop them from getting the smart things done in the back office, as we talked about. But as I said, these are patterns, they're pathways that have yet to be mapped. They're not hard to map. We just have to not think that everything's different every time. Like when you say pump skid or you say, central utility plant for one of your office buildings, what is the right product for you for a scalable central utility plant for your office spaces? What is the workflow you have and the partners that you work with in order to understand that piece part and then productize a workflow that goes with it, understanding how the data connects and is shared and how it's owned by you and what you continue to keep and what people know. That's for your central utility plant. Here's why it's a little hard and where we need your help and a lot of other people's help. You need that for every piece part. It's like we're starting from scratch. Imagine when digital twin happened in manufacturing. It didn't start where everybody knew everything all at once. You need to start building those products so we can start mapping the workflows together and attaching behaviors and tech and process to those, and they'll all be different. So I think that's real. No one company, by the way, no one company on this planet can make this happen. That's what I truly, truly believe. So that's where we need the AEC guys. First, to kind of lay down their swords of their value of where they make money. And second, to fix this. And there are a lot of great guys out and ladies out there that have said, I'm letting go of my $10 bill to get onto a $100 bill right now for value. Those are the smartest people in the ecosystem that are recognizing what they did yesterday isn't going to make them money tomorrow. So they might as well figure out how to be the best at what makes the money tomorrow. Right?
Excellent. That kind of brings us to the last question. The future is very bright and you're taking us there, Amy. So what excites you the most about future innovations?
Oh my God, I think people I meet just make me the most excited. I know that sounds so strange, but there's obviously tons of tech, but I feel like the people that I meet, it's almost funny. It's like I used to know everything about every job around the world that was doing something kind of cool and I could name them by name and I knew who they were. And now there's so much of it going on that I get lessons every day on a new company that's out there and a new thing. And then I talk to these people and they're aligned, so I get really excited that this is not such an uphill battle anymore, to the point when we're going to Advancing Prefab in a couple of weeks that you're talking at, the show that I've been doing for 5 years. Yesterday, I was prepping with some of the big trade associations. And one of the first things one of them said was, because I said, look, I'd love for you to come on stage and talk about how prefabrication is not your enemy. And he goes, do people actually think that? And I said, yes. And he said, who says that? And I said, lots of GCs and lots of people, owners, and they said, that's so 10 years ago. This is the trade association saying this from Union Trade Contract. I'm like, Yes, that makes me excited when I hear other people saying that things that have been hard to get people to understand. Like, I love other people saying those things. I love meeting other people that think the way I do. And by the way, I love being challenged. Lots of people don't know that about me, but I think if you tell me my idea is bad and you tell me why, I can understand the parameters of what I need to adjust to make it better. I love being challenged. I know it's scary for some people sometimes, but I actually really love being challenged. And I do change my mind all the time. So, I mean, we have a question up there. One architectural student wrote a paragraph, I guess, in his assignment about overcomplicating BIM software packages. As we learn more about digital requirements of the BE industry, our software packages are getting more detailed and complex. I think, listen, here's the thing. You will need complexity in the productization piece, how things are made. It doesn't necessarily mean in that model that that architect uses that he needs all or she needs all that information to be present. We just need it to be translated into what they need for inputs and outputs and parameters. So I don't think every giant manufacturing model that people are building an Inventor, not that they're giant, but any product that you're building an Inventor or Fusion or anything like that, the architect doesn't necessarily need to know how does the internal alternator actually work. They don't. They just need to know the parameters of inputs and outputs that will be captured. That's the only legacy of DFMA. That information will be left in the outside, right, for them to be able to use. Hope that answered that question. Like, it's, you know, it's different data for different usage, and not everything needs to be as detailed.
Excellent. Well, we are reaching the top of the hour and the end of our fireside chat. Thank you so much, Amy, for this great conversation and sharing your stories. And thank you for our audience. And thank you for Trustic Summit for organizing this wonderful event.
Yes.
It was truly an honor to be interviewing you and having this conversation. We are ready to transfer over to our organizers.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you for coming to this and helping. Thank you.